Divers wade into dark water. Dogs strain along the bank. Somewhere under this bridge, they're searching for a body. 3 days earlier, the phone rings inside a sheriff's office. The voice on the other end sounds flat, almost bored. Just 3 sentences. The rest of the body's under the bridge. Go look there. I put her there. Then the line goes dead. That caller is never identified. Scandia, Minnesota. It's the 12th of June, 1993. A man walking the shore of Bone Lake spots something pale floating near the water's edge. For a second, he thinks it's a mannequin's head. It isn't. Police arrive and confirm what he already suspects. This is human. A woman's head, severed cleanly at the neck, with only a few days of exposure to the elements. Whoever she was, she hadn't been in the water long. The next day, 40 miles south in St. Paul, a second discovery. A human foot, roughly a size 9, washes up near Pig's Eye Lake on the Mississippi River. Investigators want to believe these 2 remains belong to the same person. But in 1993, without modern DNA testing, they can't prove it. All they have is a theory and no name to attach to it. A police sketch goes out to the public. It doesn't look like her. Nobody recognizes the woman in the drawing because it isn't really her face, just an artist's best guess at what remained. Then, roughly a week later, the phone call. A man's voice, brief and direct, claiming responsibility and pointing investigators toward a bridge over the Minnesota River, 15 miles from where the foot was found. The caller is never traced, whether he told the truth, lied, or simply wanted to be part of something he'd only heard about on the news. Nobody will ever know. He vanishes as completely as she did. With no name, no witnesses, and a dead-end lead, the case does what so many cases from that era did. It goes cold. For the next 14 years, the woman found in 2 lakes has no identity at all. She is simply Bone Lake Jane Doe. By the end of 1993, the case has stopped moving. There is no name. No missing persons report anywhere in Minnesota matches her. No witnesses. The caller who claimed responsibility was never traced. What investigators have is a head from one lake, a foot from another, and a theory that they belong to the same woman. They cannot even prove that much. The file gets a label instead of a name. Bone Lake Jane Doe. A cold case is not a case that stopped. It is a case that ran out of things to try. Detectives cycle through. The evidence goes into storage. Every few years, someone opens the box, looks at what is inside, and closes it again, because the science has not moved far enough to tell them anything the last person did not already know. For this case, that goes on for 14 years. In 2007, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the state agency that handles forensic work for cases like this one, finally proves what investigators assumed in 1993. The head found at Bone Lake and the foot found on the Mississippi River belong to the same person. It is the first hard fact the case has produced in 14 years. It is also, in the most practical sense, useless. They now know it is one woman. They still have no idea who she is. The problem is the remains themselves. DNA is not a permanent thing. It breaks down. Water, heat, time, and exposure all degrade it. And by the time a lab is trying to pull a usable profile out of something that has been in a lake and in an evidence locker for decades, there may not be enough left to work with. Investigators try, more than once, and every attempt comes back the same way. not with the wrong answer, but with no answer at all. The DNA is simply too damaged. Then, in 2022, something changes, and it does not come from a crime lab. It comes from a non-profit. The DNA Doe Project is a volunteer organization. Genealogists, most of them working for free, who take on unidentified remains cases that law enforcement agencies cannot fund or cannot crack. They have generated leads in more than 150 cases. That year, they take on Bone Lake Jane Doe. But before anyone can run a single test, they have to raise the money to pay for it. Once the fundraising is done, they partner with a lab and choose their sample. They start with the foot. It is the obvious call. It is the larger piece of tissue, and on paper, it is the better bet. The lab works the sample and gets nothing. The DNA is too degraded to build a usable profile. After 30 years of waiting, after raising the money, after finally getting the case in front of the right people, the first real attempt fails. So they go back and they try the only other thing they have. In 2024, they send a sample from the head, and this time it works. The lab builds a DNA profile. After 31 years, the woman from Bone Lake finally has something that can be compared against another human being. Not a name yet, not a face, just a sequence. But for the first time since 1993, the case has something to search with instead of something to store. That same year, Detective Clayton Evans of the Washington County Sheriff's Office takes over the case. He is not the first detective to hold it, and for most of its life, holding this case has meant maintaining it rather than solving it. But he inherits it at the exact moment the science finally catches up. He will spend the next 2 years on it. Later, he will say that even after decades, there is always hope the science will catch up to the questions. What happens next is not police work. It is genealogy. A DNA profile on its own tells you nothing unless you have something to match it to. So the volunteers upload it to genealogy databases and look for relatives. Not the victim. Anyone related to the victim. They find a second cousin. From that single distant relative, the team starts building a family tree backward and outward, adding names, marriages, children, and dates, working toward the center of a family they have never met and cannot yet identify. And as the tree grows, one detail separates itself from all the others. The family is enormous, 15 children. And out of those 15, one of them has been missing since 1993. Nobody reported her. She simply stopped appearing in the record. Evans would later put it plainly. They started digging into the family and realized that out of all these 15 children, one of them had been missing since 93. That obviously points to Denise. The trail leads to Columbus, Ohio. Investigators travel there and sit down with a family that has been carrying an unanswered question for 3 decades. Denise Hartley was the youngest of the 15. She had a daughter, and her daughter, now an adult, agrees to give a DNA sample. That sample goes to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and everything the case has been waiting on for 33 years comes down to a single comparison. The BCA confirms it. The remains found in 2 lakes, 40 miles apart, in June of 1993 are Denise Elaine Sexton Hartley. She was 27 years old. She was the youngest of 15. She had been in Minnesota less than a year. And for 33 years, she had no name, because whoever killed her made sure of it. On the 11th of June, 2026, the Washington County Sheriff's Office makes it public. Bone Lake Jane Doe is gone. Denise Hartley is back. Sheriff Dan Starry frames it as a case coming full circle after more than 30 years and says that while nothing can change what happened, they can honor Denise by restoring her identity and giving her family the answers they deserve. Tracy Onders of the DNA Doe Project puts it more bluntly. Somebody went to great lengths to make sure Denise's name was taken from her. So who was she? Denise Hartley grew up in Columbus, Ohio, the youngest of 15 children. She became a mother young, and in the early 1990s, in her 20s, she had been in trouble with the law, and she was trying to get out from under it. She moved to Minnesota, to the Twin Cities, because she had sisters already living there. She was going to stay with them. She enrolled in college. Her daughter stayed behind in Ohio with the child's father, while Denise tried to build something she could bring her back to. This is the part that gets lost when a person becomes a case number. In the last months of her life, Denise Hartley was not drifting. She was doing the hardest version of starting over. New city, new school, living with her sisters, working toward getting her daughter back. Evans has said it directly. It appeared she was really trying to get her life back on track. And that is the woman who disappeared in a city she had barely lived in, without anyone filing a report. Which brings us to a living room in Columbus, Ohio, and a detective who has driven a long way to say something out loud. Her daughter had not seen her mother in more than 30 years. She had assumptions. She did not have answers. Evans would describe the moment carefully. They told her who they were and why they were there. And she was in so much shock and awe to finally have that closure that it was hard for her to take it all in. There is a detail in this case that is easy to move past, and it should not be. Denise Hartley was never on anyone's missing persons list, not in Minnesota, not anywhere. She had only recently arrived. She was rebuilding. It was not unusual for her to be out of contact. So when she stopped calling, the silence did not immediately look like evidence of anything. It looked like distance. And by the time it looked like something else, 33 years had gone by. Here is what the identification did not answer. The cause of death is undetermined. The manner of death is undetermined. No one has been arrested. The rest of her remains have never been recovered. And the search under the bridge in 1993, the one that came from the phone call, turned up nothing of significance. Everything the case knows about how she died, it still does not know. For Evans, the identification is not the finish line. It is the starting gun. He has said that after 2 years, getting her name back was a sigh of relief, and that, on the other side of that coin, it is time to get to work and find out who actually did this. Investigators are building a timeline of her final months from nothing, where she lived, who she knew, what the last people to see her remember 33 years later, which leaves one person unaccounted for. Everyone else in this story has a name now. The detective, the genealogist, the sheriff, the woman in the lake. The only voice still missing is the one that started it. He was on the line for a matter of seconds. He told them where to look and he told them why he knew. Then he hung up, and 33 years later, nobody has any idea who he was. Not a suspect, not a witness, not even a name to rule out. Denise Hartley has her name back. That took 33 years, a non-profit, a team of volunteers, a detective who would not put the file down, and a sample of DNA from a daughter who grew up without her. It is the answer her family waited a third of a century for. But it is only the first answer. Somebody took her name. That person has never been named himself.